Thank you.
Hi, everyone, friends and family of Tiana Star. So great of you all to come out. I can't believe what a great and warm feeling there is in this room that I'm about to cry before I've even said anything yet. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Tiana, for everything. She's amazing. So unbelievably talented and such a great heart. It's been, an honor to be working with her, as from coast to coast so far. I just want to take a few minutes and tell you about the work we do and about the problem. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about the problem. And Tiana, just listening to your song live like this for the first time, the lyric about "I'm beautiful" is echoing in my mind, because last week I was in Atlanta interviewing a young woman who had been a survivor of sexual exploitation as a teenager. She had been recruited into prostitution by a pimp in her area. After a long story of abuse and arrest and abuse again and arrest and being forced to trade sex for money night after night after night by her pimp, who she referred to as her boyfriend, and who beat her and locked her in a room, and who had 5 other girls working for him from between the ages of 15 and 25. After all of that, she actually emerged. She got out of the life. She's now 8 years out of the life, and she's an amazing young woman who does now work with survivors in the area in Atlanta. She works for an organization there, helping them. And she was telling me about what these girls need, the teenage girls who she is now seeing in the life, and who she is talking to about what happened to her and how she got out. And she said, it's so important for these girls to hear, you are beautiful. You are beautiful. Because so many of these girls it's easy for pimps to recruit, are girls who never heard that in their lives. Girls who are sexually exploited and recruited into prostitution are from families of abuse and neglect, very frequently sex abuse, and had never had anybody telling them, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're smart, you're talented, you can be anything you want. Those girls don't hear it. And a pimp comes along and starts saying, oh, you're beautiful. And they fall into his arms. And so, that's what, that line, you're beautiful, reminded me that that's what we have to tell our girls growing up. We have to support them. We have to tell them all good things about themselves, because there's so much bad stuff going on out there, and it's so easy for pimps. And let me tell you the story about pimps. What pimps are doing, they need to feed more meat into the market. So they actually are actively going to places where kids hang out, teenagers, because men like young, fit, healthy-looking young women when they buy them. So, a 12-year-old is going to be much better than a 28-year-old. So what pimps do is go to places, shopping malls, schools, playgrounds, group homes, and try to assess the situation. That girl doesn't look like she has many friends. Maybe that girl would be vulnerable. And they start chatting them up. And they start saying nice things. Now, for a girl who her whole life had not been told she's beautiful and worthwhile and great, as we have to tell our girls, to have this guy with well-dressed, expensive car saying these nice things to her, oh, hey, that's really, maybe this is something. And she believes his line of chat, and she, eventually is drawn into the life. Let me just quote one pimp who we wrote about in one of the reports we did, but it is a very typical story for pimps to be recruiting girls who had been sexually abused. Because as one of the pimps in our report put it, these girls have been raped so many times, it's my job to teach them, they might as well get paid for it. So, that's the story of what's happening in the United States. I mean, EdPAD actually works internationally, but I just wanted to pull out a little piece about the problem here in the United States. It's all very depressing. But there's a lot of huge work going on. Now, this industry has existed for a very long time. You may have heard. younger and younger girls are being recruited. But there's a huge movement in the United States to stop that, and I'm really happy to welcome you all into this movement. I've been doing this for a long time, and we have a lot of momentum going on, and things are actually better than they used to be. I know. It used to be there were no particular laws. It used to be law enforcement was arresting the kids instead of the pimps and johns. It used to be there were no services for these kids. It used to be nobody knew about it, nobody recognized it, nobody had anything going on. And now there's a huge movement of people to recognize it, to know that it's going on, and organizations, and I have to say companies, like the Body Shop, actually weighing in on doing stuff about it. So, so let me just tell you a little bit about ECPAT. ECPAT started in Asia in 1991. Partly in the same way, again, Tiana, hearing you talk is so interesting. I was working as the UN representative. No, the story begins when I was a PhD student in urban planning. A friend of mine asked me to become the UN representative for the Christian Children's Fund for him. And I said, well, no, I don't want to. I like doing my housing policy work, but I needed a job, and so okay, I'll do it for 6 months. Well, 6 months came and went. I learned all the terrible things that happen to children in the world, and I just couldn't walk away. I mean, once you know those things are going on, how do you not do something about it? At least that's how I felt. So, 20 years ago, ECPAT came to town and said, you have to start an ECPAT group in your country because your men are coming to Asia to exploit our kids. And so I was one of the people who stepped up and said, okay, we're going to do this. And now, in the 90s, it was really hard to do this because there was no momentum, and now there's tons of momentum and there's a lot going on. So, a couple of things ECPAT does. I don't want to take too much time.
No, you're fine. Tell us.
Oh, well, I was going to check the time, but my screen's not working. So, amongst the things we do, we have a grant program for service providers to provide health care to sexually exploited kids in the United States. Medicaid does pay for a certain amount of things, but pimps often brand their kids with a tattoo that says his name on it, or that says something like Daddy's Moneymaker, or Daddy's Little Girl. In order for these girls to move on in their lives, this tattoo has to be removed. Unfortunately, it's considered cosmetic surgery by Medicaid, and they won't pay for it, so ECPAT pays for these. We also pay for other types of mental health counseling that are not normally available, psychiatric care, and all the things that Medicaid sort of doesn't do. ECPAT pays for kids around the country. We also, we have a big project in getting the private sector, the travel and tourism industry, to do what they need to do to stop this from happening on their premises. Every brand name of hotel you ever heard of has child prostitution taking place on their premises. We know this, and I could give you the evidence from the transcripts of trials of pimps who have been arrested for prostituting kids out of hotels. And so you read through the transcript, and it says, and the pimp rented a room at such and such a Hampton Inn, or such and such a, a Hilton Garden or a Marriott hotel, and, put his girl in there, and then all night long men came in and bought her, services. So we have been asking companies to step up and do the right thing, and there are things that they can do to prevent this from happening, having a policy, training their staff, knowing what to do when they see or suspect something. We've had a really hard time selling this idea to the U.S. industry. Outside of the United States, 1,000 companies have signed this code of conduct, almost 1,000. In the United States, one company had signed over the last 6 years. And we've been selling and selling and selling and trying to get them to talk to us and trying to get them to take responsibility. Just in the last month, no, I shouldn't, I'm exaggerating, in the last 3 months, Delta Airlines and Hilton Hotels signed the code of conduct. That said, we have a whole lot more companies that should be doing this. I'm meeting with them. They're still resisting. They don't want to. They just don't want to. And I want to point out that in your bags, the goodie bags, is a postcard that you can use when you stay at a company that hasn't signed the code of conduct. If you'd like to ask them to sign, if you'd like to say, I'm one of your customers and I think this is a good idea, you don't have to actually say it to them. You can actually just sign the postcard and either send it or give it to them, and some people find it more comfortable to do it that way. We do have momentum, though. We are in conversations with a lot of companies. Just 2 days ago in New York, I met with 4 hotel companies and gave them the pitch about why they should do this. Now, they still were not signing. They certainly weren't happy to hear from me, but we're hoping for the best. And if everybody, you know, who you patronize as a hotel or airline does it, you know, sends in your card, you know, supports it, that can do nothing but help. Okay, I wanted to say one more thing we're doing. Okay, let me just talk about this one last thing. I mean, we do so many things I don't want to talk about.
You're fine. We'd like to hear from you.
Oh, okay. Here's a problem we have. There are not enough services for sexually exploited kids in the United States. There's estimated to be 200,000-300,000 kids right now at risk out there on the streets. 300,000, did I say that? And there's about 100 beds for sexually exploited kids in the United States. There's just not enough resources to go around for these kids. So one of the many things we do is to advocate for changes in programs and policies from government agencies to help these kids. And there's a bill that's been introduced in Congress called the Domestic Minor Sex Trafficking Deterrence and Victim Support Act. You don't have to know all that to support that. I ask you to go to my website and look at how you can help by just writing or calling your senator and asking them to support this bill. It's a very good bill. It will help kids. It will help kids by giving them the attention and support they need. And I need you all to do that. Your senators are not yet signed on as co-sponsors. And another thing we do is make sure that when sexually exploited kids are identified by the local cop, by LAPD, that, for example, that they don't arrest these kids and just shoo the John away and just not even bother with the pimp because it's too much trouble to arrest them. It's easy to arrest the kid. It's easy to process them and win a notch on your belt as a law enforcement officer for a good arrest. Kids are often arrested. There's a lot of reasons why kids are arrested instead of the people who are the exploiters and the bad guys. It's easier to arrest the kids. Sometimes it's because the cops think, well, if I arrest her, at least she's not with the pimp anymore. Sometimes the cops arrest them, and prosecutors like these arrests because then they can try to force her to testify against the pimp. But, you know, if we can't threaten her with arrest, then, you know, she might run away. So, unfortunately, what we have had in our system are kids who have been abused and neglected their whole lives, ending up in the hands of a pimp, being forced and beaten and locked up and made to provide sex services to men night after night. Their money's taken away from them, of course. It's not like they get to keep this money and then, you know, live it up or something. They're sex slaves, in effect. And then what our system has to offer them is a jail cell because they were a bad kid. Now, that's how things have been operating up until recently. Recently, states have been starting to pass laws to protect these kids from arrest and instead help them. 4 states have passed this law: New York, Illinois, Connecticut, and Washington State. And we have to pass them in other 46 states. Actually, I should say Vermont just passed their law last week. Governor hasn't signed it yet. We expect them to. Minnesota's law has been introduced, and we're working in New Jersey right now. But California has to do this as well. California's a huge state where I'm kind of, as an expat person, I'm kind of daunted by working in California on this, because there's so many of you. But I mean, we're definitely going to get there.